Well, that's it. That's it for West Virginia versus Oklahoma as Big 12 conference foes. And Oklahoma leaves to the SEC with another victory over the Mountaineers. West Virginia did get him the only time with them both in the same conference in 2022. But this one, despite some anticipation, despite maybe some excitement, around Mountaineer Nation heading into this game in Norman on the road. Neal Brown talked about prior to the game, all week really, that he didn't care about last year. He thought he wanted revenge from 2 years ago when West Virginia lost a close one to the Sooners. And obviously, Oklahoma, usually a better team, usually a better program, certainly in recent years. Maybe we can go back the last 20 and argue about some different moments. And we, of course, know about what happened in that big bowl game in the Fiesta Bowl many moons ago. But here in 2023, Oklahoma, the better team, Oklahoma ends up embarrassing and kind of humbling the Mountaineers in the midst of a season in which they are proving doubters wrong, but still far from Oklahoma. 59-20. I'm Mike Asti. This is our WVU football postgame show here on WV Sports Now, and you can find my game recap over there at wvsportsnow.com. The rest of the coverage will appear over on the site when we get it to you as well, and we're going to have reaction. We're going to have press conference videos on this channel and over there once they get sent to us. I, of course, not in Norman, even though I've done some road games this year, and of course all the home ones, and they will be back home against Cincinnati to close out the home season next week in, you say this frequently, but kind of a must win again because, 6-4, 4-3 in conference play. It's way better than what people expected. And Oklahoma, very talented despite losing 2 in a row. So I wasn't surprised West Virginia lost. I didn't think they would get absolutely turkey basted for the holiday season by Oklahoma. And that's exactly what happened after the opening score. Oklahoma basically took them to the woodshed. Certainly offense to defense. West Virginia could not stop them at all the entire game, and they eventually absolutely did stop the Mountaineers and really played the best defense I've seen from Oklahoma outside of FCS opponents in a while. And the reason why they're not a playoff team this year, and the reason why they did lose 2 going into this game, and the odds of them losing 3 in a row were pretty, again, slim, but I don't know if everyone expected it to be this bad, even if maybe you thought they'd cover the 12.5-point spread. Again, this was that and then some. But this is the best defensive effort by the Sooners in a long time, certainly in this regime, certainly under Venables, certainly, and really even from back to Lincoln Riley, but certainly since Lincoln Riley's departure and in these last couple of years, which have been lesser for Oklahoma football, of course, losing to West Virginia last year. But they're not going to be a playoff team by any means. They're not a national contender, but they're still in it in the Big 12 based on what's happened around the country. Oklahoma State did lose, and of course they beat Oklahoma, but Oklahoma not out of it yet. And West Virginia maybe would have had a puncher's chance to still be in the race without this loss if they somehow would have claimed the upset win. It didn't happen. It wasn't even close to freaking happening. And now again, West Virginia in kind of a must-win game at, moving on at Baylor to end the year, and then at home against Cincinnati, mostly because Cincinnati is so bad. They're a newcomer, and they're one of the ones that are struggling to adjust despite their recent surge as a group of 5. So West Virginia got to get them. They're not good. West Virginia has played better. They've been better despite all the struggle against Oklahoma. And I want to talk about it with you guys, do a little bit of a post-game show here as I'm waiting for the post-game press conferences and to finish out our coverage here this evening. So is this West Virginia? Is this the team? Have they been exposed? Are they this bad that they put on display on national TV on Fox against Oklahoma? Or is Oklahoma the best team they played all year? Maybe, sans Penn State, who we've seen not clearly be with the big boys of Michigan and Ohio State, but clearly be better than everybody else. So West Virginia clearly below Penn State, obviously, but they all got close to covering that spread if it wasn't for that late score, and arguably played Penn State better than they played Oklahoma, really. I mean, not even arguably. They played Penn State better. They were in it at halftime. They made Penn State sweat briefly. Penn State comfortably had that game won, of course, and they pulled away. But They played Penn State stronger and better than they did Oklahoma for sure. And we've seen Oklahoma lose to some teams that West Virginia felt like they were on par with. So did this game expose something about the West Virginia Mountaineers? Or maybe is it off of what my shirt says? And this, by the way, just a happy accident from when I was in Aruba, and they're all chill, they're calm, cool, and collected there. So they don't freak out like Mountaineer Nation is doing right now after this loss to Oklahoma. But is it exposing them? Did Oklahoma expose West Virginia as overrated, as not really much better than last year, even though the record shows it is, and maybe taking advantage of a weak schedule? And it has kind of been weak. It's been exposed. It's kind of been being weak, even though, 6-4 or 4-3, it's way better than last year, finishing 5-7. WVU will get a bowl game this year. That is a step in the right direction. Certainly not 5-7. It is not the expectations of the fan base or should be the program to only be in a bowl game at 6-6. You got to get better. And that's why I say Cincinnati is a must win, even really Baylor kind of a must win, to end the year on a strong note and allow the fan base to even be okay with Neal Brown coming back, because I do think he is. But if they lose out, that could be a different story. I think 7 wins, he comes back even without an extension, like one more year to figure this out, because they're taking a step. I think Wren is of a sound mind and likes Brown enough to do that. Granted, Cincinnati and Baylor both are winnable games. They're probably going to be favored in both of them. And certainly the home game against Cincy. So you got to at least win the home game. And then you could say it's a coin flip on the road, because Baylor sometimes scores, and you did beat them last year, but they're not good, by the way. You certainly beat them. But you get those 2 wins, you finish 8-4, you go to a bowl, maybe you show up there. Pretty much everyone plays in that, probably except Zach Frazier because of the NFL draft looming. Maybe he'd even play, because he's obviously a West Virginia product and a homegrown kid. So you win that game, or even if you don't, if you finish 8-4 and then finish 8-5, that's a much better season than what anybody freaking thought. But do you have a sour taste in your mouth because this game shows that you didn't just lose? If you lose by a touchdown or even 2, okay, Oklahoma's very talented despite losing this year a couple games. But to lose like this, again, 59-20. So I will go to the chat a little bit here. I do actually see has some chat activity. I had some freaking technical difficulties, which delayed this post-game show a bit, aside from getting the game recap and finishing out our coverage there, WVSN. So I didn't win this evening either. Technical difficulties kind of, blasted me like the Mountaineers got blasted in Norman, Oklahoma. So you see, it wasn't as close as the scoreboard indicated. I mean, the scoreboard doesn't indicate it was close at all, but I could, I guess, agree kind of. Yeah, they were never in the game. So 59-20, it could have been 59-0. I mean, they did score early, obviously. They showed some semblance of moving the ball, but no, they were never in the game. And you don't score when you're on the 1-yard line. Oklahoma's goal line stand. Name me another time Oklahoma's had a goal line stand. I mean, I can't even think of it off the top of my head. The reason why they haven't won a national title since 2000, the reason why they've lost tons of bowl games and big games, and they haven't been able to really even feel like a national title threat, even if they do squeak in the playoff and become the class of what has been this Big 12, and now obviously they're leaving the SEC, and why many feel like they're going to be a middle-of-the-pack team there and they're never going to sniff Alabama and Georgia and company, is because they have no defense. All the talents on offense, they recruit Heisman candidates there, whether it be a quarterback, receiver, running back, etc. They have talent on defense, maybe a star rating, but they never perform well. They never play well, and it's never the focus. And yet, against West Virginia, they put up one of the better defensive performances in a freaking long time, certainly under this regime, under Venables here. So, yeah, you don't score on the fourth. I mean, I guess the only pushback is that maybe the score is what it is. They lost bad. They weren't nearly as good, and they got beat down. But it's not like they didn't put up the 20. And they could have actually scored more based on moving the ball. Because, again, you don't score off a 4th and 1. I mean, you got to figure you get in there. And I maybe would have tried one pass play in the mix there. It's all runs. Feels like Jaheim's about to break it. CJ, of course, did score earlier. He's been kind of back the last couple of weeks. But in this game, it was tough sledding. And then not to score there, that was the full-on backbreaker, even with the Cole Taylor touchdown. They would get that. But once they didn't get the 4th and 1, you knew it was completely over. If you had any hope prior, and I certainly didn't believe they were winning prior, but that really solidified it. You just got to score there. I mean, that's insane. Not even to get points at all. And, of course, you're not trying for a field goal in that spot, but to get nothing after all that effort. So the score is what it is. I mean, 59-20 again. We know what's going on this year. We're getting better than bad teams, worse than good teams. In other words, mediocre. The Soviet football team is mediocre. I'm not going to say they're not mediocre. I mean, they could finish 6-6, which would be a bowl season, but that's still an average season. I mean, we could have a whole other conversation on if being 500 should even get you postseason play and money for the school and some type of trophy and add another bowl game to your history, etc. I mean, it does. It will. They will go somewhere, but it doesn't mean that you're not an average team. Certainly, if you lose that game and finish 6-7, again, I don't think they're going to lose out. So I am assuming at minimum they're 7-5, which by record is above average, but I'm not going to push back too much. They are kind of a mediocre team. They've shown at times they can be really, really good, and they've shown at times they have tons of talent and explosiveness, certainly on offense. We've seen that for several weeks. They can score. We've seen that. Defensively, they play with their hair on fire earlier in the season when Green was out and the offense couldn't do anything. So we've seen the ability there. But yeah, they were playing bad teams. Once they face good teams, the problem isn't why they're an average team, and this even goes back to last year. Because I will tell you, I think the defense was more of the problem than the offense, even though the offense certainly was an issue. And why they're average is because the defense is average. The defense is maybe deeper than it was last year, like dealing with all these injuries. If last year's team had it, they would even have been worse than I think this year, just because the minutes players got last year and then add Beanie Bishop in. They're aggressive. They're close. The ball hawk rate's there. That was the whole thing I wrote about this past week and was talking about on the broadcast. They may have read my article. It pretty much poached out of there, and I didn't see anyone else cover it. But anyway, Jeff Levering, no problem. If you want to read the coverage, I did tag you, so I'm happy you got it on the broadcast. But it shows they're better in a way. They're more aggressive. Early in the season, they didn't miss as many tackles. I do believe they're deeper. And Beanie Bishop's a stud who wasn't there last year. But overall, they still got a long way to go to be elite. They're still overall average, where last year maybe the defense was just freaking bad, which is why you were 5-7. The offense was just freaking bad. At least the second half of the year. Certainly those first two games, it wasn't bad with JT, but the defense was so bad, it didn't matter. And then you go to this year, the offense, I would say, is at least good, maybe not its best in this game. And the defense, again, is average, if not worse. And that's how you get here, 6-4, 4-3. And the losses, obviously Penn State's a mulligan. Nobody expected to win that game. They're not going to go to the playoff this year, obviously, but they're still the class of the Big Ten, besides Ohio State and Michigan, who are both potential playoff teams again, like they were last year. Penn State just won the Rose Bowl. It's not like they're trash. They're going to be a 10-win team again overall. Not those teams, but overall, Penn State's a team that, everyone expected to beat West Virginia. So you throw that out. Again, they play 11 Power 5, which is more than most, and that was a really tough game. A lot of other teams similar to West Virginia, like, say, the Maryland program, they never would have scheduled a team like that out of conference. Like, you don't see Maryland playing Oklahoma out of conference. If Maryland schedules Oklahoma, that would be very similar to the WVU schedule in Penn State, by the way. So didn't happen. It's not going to happen, and West Virginia did it. They shouldn't. I don't think they will once they get done with these out-of-conference situations going on and Ren gets to hold the schedule in 2 years. But nonetheless, they played it, throw it out. But the Houston loss is really, really bad. Because, of course, Garrett Green taking his helmet off and messing up the game winner to Hudson Clement, as great of a story as that would have been, and obviously Dana being down, and that maybe could have helped fire him because he's still been losing, and that would have gave him no good moments this year. And you saw that's the angst in him and how much he wanted that game and the camera shot. That was all dashed because you take the helmet off 15 yards further back. I never will be convinced that Houston would have been able to score, and Hail Mary converted there at the end. Ball probably wouldn't even have made the end zone 15 yards back. However, with all of that said, and they know it all too, and Brown and Green have talked about that being an issue and that being maybe why they lost, or at least they wouldn't have lost if that didn't happen. But they lost because they were horrendous on defense, the missed tackles, they couldn't stop anybody. That was a bad game overall, even though the end there was so bad and was gut-wrenching. And then Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State's a good team. They're a good team, even though they just lost to UCF, who West Virginia beat, as much as that makes sense. West Virginia kind of handled UCF eventually. Oklahoma State took care of business against West Virginia, and then UCF beats Oklahoma State. So the Big 12 just cannibalizes itself. Oklahoma State had a bad loss earlier in the year to South Alabama, but once Ollie Gordon's got going, yeah, he's been rough, and they've been rough, and they have a Hall of Fame coach. but West Virginia had a lead going in the fourth quarter, and Ollie Gordon ran for 149 in that fourth quarter. If you cut that down to like 90 yards rushing, West Virginia probably still wins it. So they blew that game, even though to a kind of good team. That doesn't hurt as much as Houston, but they shouldn't have lost really because they had a lead and they still classified as blowing it. And this game, they're just not close to as good. So if you would have had this season go the Penn State loss, this loss, and that's it, everyone would be happy with that, even though you would still feel you're not yet where you want to be in terms of national prominence. If even you would add the Oklahoma State loss in there, even though they've been exposed at times this year, it would still kind of be like, we blew that game for West Virginia fans. But overall record-wise, 7-3 right now, and 5-2 in Big 12 play. You're still right there in the conference race, and then you're really still only losing to quality, good programs. Adding the Houston loss is what makes this record maybe less than it should have been this year based on the schedule, because, again, you played so bad and then lost at the end with the stupid penalty and then on the Hail Mary, which is just gut-wrenching to lose just in general, no matter how a game goes. So they took advantage of a relatively easy schedule in terms of quality wins. They don't really have many, even though they thought they had one against TCU earlier in the year. They're the national runner-up last year, but this year they've certainly been average at best, and other teams have beat them. Texas Tech's a good win because West Virginia hadn't done under Brown, but they're not a great team by any means. Pitt is just god-awful, and they were even worse with Jerkovic at QB, so that doesn't mean much besides beating your rival, and fans don't have to hear from Pitt fans all offseason. Maybe could brag a little bit on their own, because obviously West Virginia right now is better than Pitt, and Pitt maybe having their worst season in program history, as insane as that sounds. And maybe at UCF, because it's a tough place to play. BYU, you beat them down. Granted, they're dealing with tons of injuries. They did have a winning record entering the game, and they're going to be a bowl team. Like, you beat some bowl teams. You did beat TCU with a winning record at the time, even though they've been exposed. You beat BYU with a winning record then. They both enter 5-3, even though BYU was under 500 in conference play. So, yeah, you could argue West Virginia doesn't have any quality wins. But there have been teams over the years that have got bowl seasons, that have got quality win seasons, got good seasons, got seasons to celebrate with 8+ wins, if not more, without really beating anybody because they took advantage of when teams were down or a weak schedule or whatever the case may be. Last year's West Virginia team, the Big 12 was stronger. It was. TCU got in the playoff despite not winning the conference because of all the ranked teams they played. The West Virginia team last year, just the way they were, the chemistry, the heart, it wasn't all there. They wouldn't have won as many games as even this year's team has won so far. And you got to still take advantage of that. So if West Virginia hypothetically ends 8-4, even the Houston loss, that loss sucks, but you're losing to good teams otherwise, and you're still taking advantage of when the conference is down in a weak schedule. In a year, you got to do that. You got to do that if you want to have Brown stay. And I know the players do, even though the fans certainly do not. But that's a business you got to freaking take care of if you want to power this on. Yeah, BYU and Tech had backup QBs in. Pitt QB was bad. Yeah, Phil Jerkovic was bad. I mentioned that. So bad he had to become a tight end. Didn't really play tight end. But yeah, no, 100%. I agree, Harold. I just talked about it. They did take advantage of teams either dealing with issues or that aren't really that good and maybe were overrated, like, say, Pitt. But I don't think last year's team would have, number one. Number two, the record is the record. So, like, if teams are going to have horrible strength of schedules and play nobody like UCF did in 2017 and claim championships at the NCAA, if you look on the website, doesn't really give them the discrepancy whether it's there versus the PDF, and half of media doesn't give them credit for it, and they put it on the damn press box. It looks ridiculous. Their strength of schedule was awful. They played nobody. They won the bowl game, but they played like one good team all year prior to that bowl game against Auburn. Memphis was probably the best win, or a really average Pitt team that year, and they celebrate it. And I'm not saying West Virginia should be at that low-level standard because that was a group of 5 team doing that. And again, that 2017 title looks ridiculous and is as fraudulent as they come. But Maryland's going to be a bowl team this year off a really weak schedule with no quality wins. They're bragging about it right now. Again, I'm not saying get to that level and brag about crap, but you got to win when your schedule can be easy. Pitt, when they won the ACC 2 years ago, and they got rings in the finger and a trophy in the trophy case, and really that's the special year, the only one they've had in 30 years, certainly now under Narduzzi in this tenure. That was a relatively down ACC. Clemson was down there even in the midst of their dynasty. Before now, they really got down. Before Florida State booked it back up again, Miami was still floundering. And they got a ring, and they're not going to take it off their finger. They took advantage of a weak conference and took advantage of the division situation that the Big 12 doesn't even have, where it's not always 1 versus 2, and they won. So the point of it is, West Virginia, when you see the situation this year where the Big 12 is down and where it's an easy schedule and you have backup QBs and you have teams that are overrated on the schedule, you really can only lose to the really good teams. You got to beat those teams, and you got to have a quality record at the end. You got to take advantage of that to build something for the program, to get more recruits in, to build up the Country Road Trust, which, by the way, the NIL situation, despite the school being broke, as a school, WVU as a school, they're rough financially, but the NIL situation is not, and that's going to help the football, even the men's basketball for the future, which would be a conversation for another day. But the NIL is not broke. It is not. It is just as good, if not better, than most of the teams in what's going to be the new Big 12. It's not competitive with Texas and Oklahoma by any means, and who knows Colorado with Dion there. But if we're talking about everybody else, yeah, it is. It 100% is. Certainly with Oklahoma State and the current teams in the Big 12 right now, they got to worry about for the future that they're going to stay there. It is competitive. The NIL money, the name, image, and likeness money that'll help you in recruiting, the facilities that I'm around all the time covering the team, they are top notch. So those things are reason for the future to have some belief. If you can win and beat the crap, take advantage of an easy schedule, have a quality season, go ahead and get in a bowl and win a bowl. If all that happens, you could build something. You could build something, even though you're still frustrated in year 5 with Brown. But you're not going to apologize for the wins. This isn't like you scheduled nothing on an out-of-conference. You had 2 Power 5s in out-of-conference play, and everybody else plays in FCS too. You, yourself, West Virginia, were able to get kind of lucky with how the conference schedule unfolded for you, and you didn't schedule it. The conference gave it to you. So, yeah, you take advantage of it, and you don't apologize for doing so. But who knows what would have happened with a difficult schedule. That's not the situation right now. 9 wins is possible. Well, you're talking about the bowl game, obviously. 2 more here in the regular season would be 8-4. 9 in the regular season is not possible anymore. But yeah, if they finish 9-4 and win the bowl game, there is nobody in the world that thought that was going to happen prior to this season. Nobody at all. People would have laughed at you if you would have said that. I thought this team could make a bowl, being close to it and covering it, but I would never have said 9. I would probably have said 7 at the max if they win the bowl game. So to finish with 9, again, is a quality season based on last year and based on building something. And the NIL situation is something, NIL situation, that you can build for the future. It is a positive right now, even though it's hard to think of that because the financial situation at the school is obviously not one, but it's separate bank accounts. So the problem for me is not even losing this game in the way you did, because you lose this game, you're far from Oklahoma. They're leaving. I get it. Number one, you'd feel better about the year if you were at least closer in this game. I agree, because I thought you'd lose, but man, you never were in it. Again, you were better against Penn State than in this game. And then the Houston loss stings the most. If you have the Houston game as a win, no matter how bad it looked, if that Hail Mary doesn't happen, then again, you're losing to Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, and Penn State. 2 of them are blue bloods that have been dominant for 100 years, generally speaking, as national powers. And Oklahoma State is pretty freaking good on a regular basis, certainly with Mike Gundy. I mean, he has like 7 10-win seasons. So those 3 programs would not be embarrassing to lose to. Losing to Dana and Houston, who's not good, and he's obviously a former coach, and it was on the road, but you played like absolute dog shit. And then the Hail Mary at the end, yeah, that stings, and it will sting for a while, probably until you play him next year with or without Brown and with or without against Dana, because it might not even be against Dana if he gets fired. And then what kind of win is Houston if you don't face Dana? There's no rivalry between West Virginia and Houston otherwise. So that just does sting. It does. I get it for the Mountaineer fan that freaking stings. But separate from that, and there's no excuse for that game all the way through it, from Hail Mary to bad penalty to missed tackles and bad interceptions and how you played. Otherwise, it's still way above expectation, and it kind of can be building something. Yeah, 9 wins and a bowl win. And in a relatively quality bowl, you would hope it's not the guaranteed rate or the 6 incarnations back of the Cheez-It Bowl that's now the Citrus Bowl. So obviously that would be good. But what that previously was, no, you don't want those. You don't even really want the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Granted, I wouldn't mind going back to Florida, and that would be cheap for me to go back for our company. But I probably would go to that one. I don't know, depending on where it is, whether I'll probably go. But there's a chance at a decent bowl game with some history behind it. That chance still exists. You got to win out. These are bad teams. You got to win at home, certainly against Cincinnati. You lose out, then I don't think Brown's back. You win one of them, I do think he is, even though the fans won't be happy. And if you win out, then I do think you only really look back and are mad about the Houston game because everyone else you're playing either has a Hall of Fame coach or is a good team with tons of talent. And Oklahoma is still in the midst of a really good quality year. They're going to win 10 games likely, even though they lost 2 in a row of the national playoff. They're still way better than West Virginia. So it's not like I'm surprised about the result. But the way you lost, yes, it is a sour taste. I totally get it. Any other questions here while I have you here on our WVU football post-game show? Game recap over there, WVSN. We'll get the pressers over there here and on this channel when they come. Got reaction I'm going to throw up over there. Obviously, people are talking on social media as I'm taking a break from it, so I'll then be there as well. Unfortunately, I do jump there. Maybe mentally, I probably should leave and take some mental respites from Twitter, or X as it's now called. And you can also follow us, by the way, on social media all the way through at WV Sports Now, whether we're talking Twitter, X, Facebook, or wherever. And a lot of activity on our Facebook page, of course. But the comments, something to be desired. So I do warn you before you venture over there. But is it the way West Virginia lost this game? Because I do see a lot of people that were, and I did even a media with fan spaces the other day, actually. I did a spaces kind of representing media with some content creators and fans. And I didn't think they were going to win this game, but there were some that thought they would. And a lot of them were very, very high on this team now, including some that were out on Neal Brown as recent as last year, even earlier in the season. So it seemed like, despite the Houston game being so bad, that winning at UCF and then beating BYU down, not just winning, but beating BYU down, taking advantage of this situation and then slapping them around and getting a really impressive win on national TV, that there were some people that were willing to trust this climb a little bit. Now, I'm not saying they were excited because it is year 5 and it's been a losing record overall and only the one bowl win to this point and well below the expectations of the history of the West Virginia Mountaineers, the 15th, 20th program, certainly of what's been put up the last 20 plus years with Rich Rod, even Bill Stewart and Dana. I get it. And yes, WVU was not competitive in this game. I hear that 59-20, they were not. And I think that's the issue. It's not so much losing to Oklahoma, but not being competitive, not even being in the game ever. After your first score, they score, and you're already worried they're going to run you out of the building because you can't stop their offense. And then that came to fruition and was even worse. And it's a miracle they didn't get over 60 points, honestly. And then you kind of look bad at the end with the brawl situation, and it really wasn't that much of a brawl, and the lights being off kind of elicited that. And Anthony Wilson wants to be Carl Joseph, and he didn't really target. He just stood over somebody, so it's good they break that out. But, yeah, an Oklahoma player ends up getting ejected. It looked like the West Virginia team just kind of mentally unraveled, which they admitted happened against Houston, which led to that loss, even though that was close. They're a much worse team than Oklahoma, so maybe that's why that was close. But you can't have that on the road. You cannot have that. I mean, this was a big game. You beat them last year. They wanted revenge, but they were vulnerable. They just had lost a couple when they're leaving the conference. You want to get one on the road. You haven't won in Oklahoma, West Virginia for, 40-plus years at this point. So there was a lot to play for. I kept writing about it. A lot was on the line, a lot to play for. The way the games unfolded during the day gave you a lot to play for with, again, Oklahoma State losing to UCF, a team that you beat. I mean, the door was open to get back in that conference race and get into a really quality bowl game that would mean something beyond just saying, hey, we won a bowl game. That didn't happen, obviously, and we'll see what they get in and how the record finishes because 8-4, it's still likely to be a decent bowl game. But West Virginia would have proved something. I think West Virginia had an opportunity in this game against Oklahoma, certainly on the road, despite Oklahoma losing 2 in a row. Tons of talent. They're still a ranked team. if West Virginia would have been competitive in the game, even after beating them last year, but they were so down then, say West Virginia lost this game by 7 points or even 14, but like it was close and it felt close throughout, even if Oklahoma did cover that 12.5-point spread, I think West Virginia fans could take that and say, okay, again, I'm not happy about the Houston loss. Every other game I can deal with that West Virginia lost. This is still a really good team that you faced. Top 5 recruits all across the board. It's on the road, tough place to play. And the defense played better than it really has ever. So not too mad. Like power through. West Virginia's going to win the final 2, finish 8-4, maybe the 9 wins. Derek's bringing up there. You win the bowl game. It's a good bowl game, etc. You play somebody you could prove something against. It's not slop. But to lose 59-20, where you're not competitive, as the chat's telling us, that's where it's like, okay, you just take advantage of a bad schedule. I do say again, last year's team wouldn't have. A lot of teams don't get flack when they do. A lot of teams claim things they shouldn't when they have a schedule be easy. So if that's going to happen, why not you do the same? Keep up with the Joneses. But I get not feeling good about the situation right now. Now, to me, despite losing this way and losing this bad to Oklahoma, it doesn't mean I think they're going to lose to Cincinnati, though. Cincinnati is not good. Now, I think Baylor's more of a coin flip than Cincinnati, certainly being at Baylor in Waco. And no one wants to go there. And those games always are a lot of points between West Virginia and Baylor. But Cincinnati, like you lose to Cincinnati, it's back on. Neal Brown pressure back on. Vegas odds back there. He's on the hot seat again, flame it up. And, unless they romp Baylor, he might be getting fired. As I said, I think 7 wins is enough to keep him. But Cincinnati should not be a loss. Should not be a loss. Cincinnati is not good. So, and they've been close and competitive in some games. And I get they also beat Pitt that you beat. But again, we've seen Pitt is not good. So that cannot be a loss. It is, again, really like a must-win home game. But they can. They can win it. West Virginia should still be better and be a better football team than the Cincinnati Bearcats. And we've seen that this year. They're playing a similar schedule. They literally have a common out-of-conference opponent. And West Virginia will be at home. I'd imagine the Mountaineers are going to be favored. May not be by a lot because of this result against Oklahoma, but I'd imagine at least 3, certainly at minimum 2.5. Maybe it'll go to 4.5. Maybe it'll open at 4.5. If I had to throw a prediction out there. I don't think more, though. I think if they would have came close with Oklahoma or certainly beat the Sooners, you would see like a 7.5 plus situation or like a BYU spread that was even more than that. Not going to get that now. But forget Vegas spreads because they've been on and off West Virginia this year. They've been wrong just as much as they've been right predicting the Mountaineers, and this season more than ever. Again, they started off with that Colorado TCU game and then have kind of sucked throughout the season. They usually are right, though. And they've been more right in other years. Maybe they're getting used to the transfer portal and NAL. But you can't lose to Cincinnati. I don't think the result – I mean, obviously you want to feel good about the game and you should beat them down. But no matter what happens, even if it's like Houston – West Virginia got to win. Got to win. Got to win. You lose to Cincinnati, and that's going to have the last year's vibe again. It's going to be 2022 vibes again. Now, granted, again, you're in a bowl. You weren't last year, so it's already better by nature of the record, and you will of a postseason game that we all know West Virginia is going to go to and going to use it and all the climb and the building and all that BS. And it could mean something if you have a decent record and a game actually means something for history. But you got to beat Cincinnati to keep those vibes. To have those vibes be legitimate, not just being sold by Neal Brown trying to tell you about a climb and talk about making a bowl and all that and the 3 bowls in 6 years or 5 years, which isn't that great. And what the bowl win was a COVID year. And you would have lost Oklahoma that year if you played that game. So then it wouldn't have been really as much of a winning record as it was. But losing to Cincinnati is going to not make any of that feel good. So I'm going to round things out here unless I have anybody else in the chat. I did want to put something out there as I'm waiting for the press conferences. And they will be on this channel as well as WV Sports Now. Again, our game recap already there. Reaction will go there as soon as I get off with this. And then more to come in the days to follow, whether it be my takeaways to pop at some point here. And then, of course, Neal Brown and company throwing out there those long press conference session there, kind of the gauntlet through the afternoon on Monday, and I can't even get lunch. We got so many of them in a row. Okay, does the incoming buyout money from OU and UT leaving factoring in Neal Brown's buyout. Do you mean like the money that West Virginia and all those teams are making from that? Could West Virginia use part of that for the buyout? Is that kind of what you're asking? I mean, everyone's benefiting from that in a way, but I've also seen a lot of reports that it's not like Oklahoma and UT are getting gashed financially to get out of there as much as people think just by seeing the number, because there's different things being finangled and different kind of kickbacks. They're not really getting screwed financially like people thought initially. They just want it out, so they're going to get screwed financially. Not really the case, but it's not even so much that. There's also the TV share, the new TV deal that's all being floated around. West Virginia getting a cut from that. They're not doing the SMU thing in the ACC. I mean, they're getting a cut from that. So you can use whatever money you can use. I'll say that. Here's what you can't do. You can't have somebody that donates to the English department or to the history department, and then somehow the school and you talk, you're the football program, you talk to Gee, and I mean, obviously shady things could occur, so I'm not saying this doesn't happen, but you're not supposed to, legally. You can't say, give me that money that was donated because somebody threw $1 million to help, the engineering department, which is a very good one. I had a roommate that was a lot of friends actually when I was there in journalism that were doing engineering. That's good. Or anyone for the hospital. You can't take money donated to WVU medicine or to the engineering department and throw it to Neal Brown's buyout. Can't do that. If somebody throws money into NIL, like Ken Kendricks and his Arizona Diamondback go to the World Series, obviously made some money with all those postseason games and markability of that franchise now, then yeah, that can be used. If somebody really wants to gash and throw some money in there and just make it rain, then yeah, that can be used. And obviously athletic department money can be used, but it's the same thing why the CNN graphics kind of piss me off of people throwing up signs and students saying, well, Neal Brown makes this and we don't have any money here and we're cutting departments. Neal Brown's salary does not affect what's going on with the languages and departments being cut. That's different banks. So there's one for the athletic department, there's one for the school, and then there's one for NIL. You're not supposed to use the school's money, and the school's not allowed to use your athletic money. Like when you make a bowl and you get the money there, that doesn't help the language department. That would be helping the football program, which is why at the top of the show here, despite West Virginia looking so bad against Oklahoma, clearly far from the Sooners, going to make a bowl, but how good do you feel about it? Because, again, they did take advantage of a weak schedule. Granted, still better than last year. But they're going to have things that are going to help the program, even if it annoys you. And we could argue if it should help the school instead, or if you want to have the football program and basketball programs have NIL money when the school is poor. I get all of that. I see how that looks bad. And we could debate that all day, because I could also argue when the sports departments are good, it helps enrollment. I experienced that when I was a student. You experienced that, Derek, when you were a student. So it does work both ways, but it's all different bank accounts. But so, yeah, I mean, whatever money they're getting that is into the athletic department bank account, they can use, or donations can be used. NIL can be used. Money for the school academically, no. So it's a different thing there. But it's all over the place in terms of what Oklahoma and Texas really did actually lose in terms of those schools. But they got out. They want to be out. And it's a financial push to be in the ACC. They thought that was where the world was going. Obviously, realignment happened. When that first happened, I thought the Big 12 was dead in the water. Brett Yormark has kicked some ass in some boardrooms. He kept the Big 12 alive. They are stabilized. They're not the Big 10. They're not the SEC, certainly not the top dogs. But when you factor in football and basketball together, which is why he maybe wants to split the contracts, because basketball is so elite and so deep, that overall football, basketball-wise, which is all anything matters, and really is just about football, it is the best, certainly one of the best, and it is number 3 in football behind the Big 10 and the SEC, when everyone thought the Pac-12 would be that and the Big 12 would be dead. So, no, the Pac-12 competitive teams this year is a swan song. They're gone. The Big 12 is going to stay around. And funny enough, the West Virginia Mountaineers in the new Big 12 are going to be the winningest program historically. More than Utah, who's been a really elite program and really, really good in the Pac-12 that's coming aboard. More than Oklahoma State, that has a lot of history and certainly this Mike Gundy tenure. More than Colorado, who obviously has the early 90s, and they've been bad for so long. They got a lot of losses, but they built up a lot of wins over 100 years too. And, they've been losing a lot of games now with Dion. They're not clearly what people thought at the beginning of the season, but there's some pizzazz around them. But no, West Virginia arguably is the new blue blood of the new Big 12. They got to play like it, though, and they got to be able to obviously play better and consistently play better, and you can't have these moments. But that all will be to the future. The one last thing I do want to touch on before I close up shop here on this post-game show, again, the Mountaineers did lose to Oklahoma and got beat down 59-20. So that's really the focus of this, even though we always can go on tangents. And West Virginia now 6-4, 4-3 in conference play. They're not going to be in Dallas playing for the Big 12 title. That's pretty much I'm comfortable saying. But they're going to be in a bowl game. It could be a quality one, or it could be a crap one. It depends on the rest of the year. They got to win out to really make you feel good. If they beat Cincinnati and lose to Baylor, you can feel like so-so, but I do think Brown will be back. If they lose out, I think actually he would be gone despite this season getting into a bowl because of the 4-1 start. But I do now just have the pressers coming my way, so I'm going to get out of here and pump those up for you. But it also makes it feel like you're much further away from where you should be while you're supposedly climbing in a better year where you're proving critics wrong, because you don't just lose to Oklahoma, you lose in such horrendous fashion where you never really were in the game. But the last thing I did want to bring up just quickly was Garrett Green. He's been so good recently, even in some losses. Besides the helmet blunder, like he's been really good for about a month since coming back from the injury he suffered in the backyard brawl. And you could argue and point to, and his defenders will, that the reason why the offense was impotent back then is because he wasn't there. And Nico Marchiol is not close to as ready as he is, even though he maybe can throw more. And Garrett's shown that whether he's throwing or passing, and yes, he's much more of a runner than a thrower, but he's able to move the ball. He's able to galvanize. He's able to be a leader. Generally does not make tons of mistakes in terms of turnovers, only 3 picks and only had 2 entering this game. So Garrett Green's played well. He's thrown up yards. He did it on the ground mostly against BYU, but that's 3 rushing TDs. Like, you want more out of the passing game from him, obviously, and he still has some things to clean up. But he's been really good for about a month since returning. He was not good in this game against Oklahoma. And you don't think it's the best defense he played. Like, he actually looked better against Penn State, which is really the best defense he's played. There were better defenses off ranking that he's played earlier this year than even Oklahoma. And Oklahoma's defense is not that good. We've seen that. That's why they lost 2. They're not even known for defense. And yet they look great in this game. They caused Garrett Green fits. He was misfiring. He was throwing the ball off target. He was throwing it either over receivers that only Cole Taylor could catch, or he wasn't even running enough. Like, sometimes he scraps the play and keeps it, and that's how he saves a bad passing game, like against BYU. Not great passing, but did it on the ground, and that was enough. And then did a lot more passing against UCF, but also sprinkles the ground. He needs to get going on the ground to kind of get him excited about a game, and he can save plays that are dead with his legs. That's why West Virginia always loves a dual threat QB. He's not Pat White or Rasheed Marshall here, but he has that movement. Like, generally, Garrett Green got to get 50 yards plus on the ground, 150, 200 yards throwing, no picks, no turnovers, a touchdown or 2, and that's a good game. Efficient football, too, from him, and smart football. You didn't see that in this game. Like, we're looking at 50% some passing. I don't have the stats in front of me, but first half was about 50% passing. The yards kind of are there because of the end, but that's a lot of garbage time. Didn't finish the game. Obviously, they're out of it. And just some errant throws all across the board. So you got to see better from Green. Got to see more from Green. He got to improve, and he got to show that he can be this against a really good team like he's been recently against kind of so-so teams. But he did look better against Penn State than even Oklahoma. So I don't know what happened here with more seasoning under him, and he's been playing better to all of a sudden dip and be worse. But I'm sure Brown's going to talk about that and did talk about that. I'm sure Green takes the 2 on the chin that wasn't good enough at all. So pressure is now on Green as well, and he's likely the QB1 next year, not going anywhere. Eligibility is still there left, and he's done enough to earn that probably. I would imagine they're not going to bring in a transfer, but who knows in this day and age. But he needs to totally make that not a question by playing really well against Cincinnati and Baylor. Again, not good teams that you should beat. So the pressure on Brown, number 1, to stick around, got to win those games, certainly at least one of them, certainly the home game. Pressure on Green to show you something because he's finally dipped back to what the critics kind of said he was, that not enough of a passer and didn't even run enough against the Sooners. And then pressure on the defense to show you something again, because the reason why they're an average team is the defense is average. It's deeper, it's better than last year. It's still not nearly good enough. It's not what it was even 2 years ago or every other year under Brown prior to recently. And despite all the injuries, they got healthy in this game. The offensive line needs to be better too. The offensive line was the healthiest it's been in weeks in this game and played real bad. They lost the battle of the trenches. That can't happen again. So a lot to clean up. It was a bad day at the office at Norman. They won't be back there potentially ever again. So Oklahoma gets the bragging rights. West Virginia does get one while they're Big 12 opponents last year, but never in Oklahoma with both in the Big 12. And we'll see if they ever play again, but I think West Virginia fans are probably happy to be done playing Oklahoma. And again, West Virginia now has to finish strong to get anybody excited again like they were entering this game against the Sooners. But Oklahoma does win it 59-20, beat down fashion in Norman. Those lights are turned off frequently as the Mountaineers get humbled by the Sooners as they bowl to the SEC. Again, hit us up over at WV Sports Now for the rest of our coverage of this football season, whatever happens in the offseason, wherever that goes, of course, the basketball season, and then everything else around Mountaineer athletics.